As you just heard, this meeting is being recorded. I'm Laura Dresser, teach in the School of Social Work, and have been part of a group that has pulled together noon panels on Fridays a lot of this summer in response to the murder of George Floyd and the uprising for Black lives in its wake. Let me just cover a couple things quickly before I get out the way. And that is, first of all, please do keep yourself on mute. It gets awful echoey in here. So do keep yourself on mute. You can be elevating questions or affirmations in the chat. We'll be watching that, and I'll try and move resources and other ideas into the chat as needed. But that's a good way for us to talk to each other, and questions can come in that way. And then if there's time and the panel's up for it, then they're gonna, we'll call out questions on the chat, and people can unmute and speak then, but start with the chat and make sure that you can be watching that go by. This is recorded, so people can see this who weren't able to be with us today, and I'm really grateful to the panelists for agreeing to that because they have so much to bring. I want to thank the School of Social Work for hosting this, and the other folks on the committee, Jason Lee, Amanda Ngola, and Jenny Browngan, who have worked with me on this. In 2 weeks, Jackie Bogus will be speaking at noon. That's our next session is 2 weeks from now, so please join us then. But with all that preamble, let me say what we've got today is Kadijha Marquardt-Davis, a student that I got to know very well in my seminar last year, who agreed generously to bring a discussion that the School of Social Work needs on Defund the Police, what it means, why it matters, and how social workers can support the movement. Joining her on the panel today are Savion Castro from the school board and a leader in grappling with and moving to defunding police and the cops in schools at MMSD, but a leader for the community more broadly. And Ayomi Obuseh, I hope I'm saying that close to right. I forgot to ask about your last name, who has been a youth leader and in the streets leading youth marches and leading this community forward in really embracing and trying to change in ways that celebrate and honor and make Black Lives Matter. And so I'm really grateful to the three of them. I am going to be on mute and just watching the chat. If anybody has problems or issues, you can direct comments to Jason or me in the chat directly if there's something we need to deal with. But otherwise, just turn your attention and your appreciation, like mine, to Kadijha, Savion, and Ayomi for being with us and spending time with us to help us think today. Thank you three so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura, for that nice introduction. As Laura said, my name is Kadijha Marquardt-Davis. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin Masters of Social Work program May 2020, so nice recent graduate. And I currently work in the state legislature for a representative there. How all of this is going to go today is I'm just going to provide like a really quick overview of the topic, and then I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves and just provide a little bit of information about themselves, and then we're just going to jump right into this discussion. How this is going to be based is I really wanted this to be more of like a loose, casual conversation, just because some of the topics that we're going to cover, they can be a little heavy, and I think having a more casual conversation around them will, I don't know, allow it to be easier understood and everything like that. So let's jump right into it. So what does defund the police mean? Have been getting and seeing a lot of people have confusion around this, which is why we wanted to have this discussion today. And I wish I could give you like some wild, complicated answer on what Defund the Police is, but it literally just means that we are reallocating funds from the police into other social programs. And thinking about this, people usually, when they hear this term, get really freaked out because they think it means that people want to abolish the police. And while that is also a very valid sort of avenue and road of advocacy, today we're only going to be talking about what redirecting those funds would look like. And thinking about like why people would want to do this and how it sort of relates to our society, and thinking about how we police our communities, I think it's also good to situate the conversation around like what the data actually shows in terms of policing, and if it's actually an effective way of dealing with violence. So data currently shows that 9 out of 10 calls for service are not nonviolent encounters. And most times, actually calling the police tends to escalate a situation rather than de-escalate a situation, mainly because of the type of training police officers have. And advocates for the Defund the Police movement argue that shifting funds towards social services can improve things like mental health, addiction, homelessness, all, a wide array of areas that social workers actually work within and might be, effective in handling rather than the police. It's also important to note that, unfortunately, police officers are not as successful as people might think in actually solving crimes. They have like approximately like a 30% rate for murders, 70% for robberies, and 47% for aggravated assaults that go uncleared every single year. So while those statistics might be good in some other avenues, in terms of solving crimes, like that's not a really, really good rate. And then particularly in thinking about how the police interact with Black and Brown communities, there tends to be a lot of overcriminalization and unnecessary charges that get placed on these communities as a result of high police force and racism and bias, unfortunately. This can be seen in sort of like the stop and frisk laws that were happening in New York City. And actually a study found that the NPD stop and frisk program found that like 90% of people stopped by the police were not committing any crimes whatsoever, didn't have any weapons on them, and overwhelmingly people that were stopped were Black and Latino, and they were, physical force was used on them. It's also been found that if you want to reduce crime, education and improving like workforce infrastructure is the best approach. So situating that around the conversation of why defund the police is an important thing to do. So with that said, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to jump right into this conversation. So Savion, I'm going to have you go first. Feel free to tell everyone who you are, what you do, and a little bit about why you're here.
Thank you. I was just thinking, depending on how I wake up, my bio will change. So I'm Savion Castro. I do serve on the Madison School Board. Have been a product of Madison Schools and UW-Madison. So I graduated from high school in 2013. Once at UW-Madison, I was in the People program and studied sociology and African American history. Graduated in winter 2018, and pretty much from that course forward, I have tried to be involved and support work for justice in our community across the board, particularly in education, but also in policing and housing, healthcare, and how all these things interact. So it's a little bit about myself.
And then Yomi, same for you, if you would like to introduce yourself.
My name's Yomi. I'm 19. I also was a product of MMSD. So I moved to Madison West from Germany, and I'm a military brat, I guess. I go to UW and I'm pursuing law school in the future. When I was abroad, I studied around Europe and even helped during the Ebola crisis because my father's an epidemiologist. I've competed internationally with competitions like HOSA, as well as Model UN, and last year I competed nationally for spoken word. I guess as my understanding of African American history grew, my curiosity led me to work with Dane County, UW Extension, and then I interned at the state capitol. I stepped forward after the protests or after the rioting to help do peaceful protesting. And we've created a group called Impact Demand, which is the youth-led movement here in Madison. We recently put on the Color Fest event, if you've seen it in the paper. And we basically try to impact communities and demand change through policy, activism, and education. And I'm confident that Madison can be the place that it claims to be through this youth-led movement.
Thank you so much, Ayomi. All right, let's just jump right into this discussion. So although I just defined what defund the police means, I would like to throw this to both Savion and Ayomi and ask them like what defund the police means to y'all. So for me, defund the police means funding a future for everyone, funding hope, and funding services that are actually equitable. So Savion, what does defund the police mean to you?
Yeah, and I think you touched on a lot of great part of it. I think what defund the police means for me is looking critically at, what police actually do and the phenomenon of crime and what are the root causes of a lot of crime. And so it's a commitment to being more proactive on that front because policing is inherently a reactive institution. And so, as you mentioned, 9 out of 10 calls are for nonviolent crimes, and police, don't have any expertise in actually solving those issues people are going through. They just have, a badge and a gun. Certainly, they may be trained, but that's certainly not their specialty. And so, I think it's shrinking the footprint of policing and being more proactive on some of these social issues we see in our communities, whether it be lack of social services, lack of investment in education, a history of a racial caste system. I'm rambling now, but for example, I think nationwide, the average is police only solve 40% of violent crimes. It's even lower in some neighborhoods. So can we shrink their footprint and make them good at solving crime, what we actually want them to do?
Yeah, defunding the police is just like you said, it's trying to find the parts that work and place money there. Basically, put your money where your mouth is. And I think one of the important differences between defunding and abolishment is we're not always trying to advocate for money to be placed into other programs outside of the police force. We're also looking for money to be placed within the police force, such as training and just education in general, or trying to teach people how to de-escalate, because right now it's more of a preventative measures for the officers instead of de-escalation. So the difference between the two is investing into the parts that work in the police force as well as outside resources instead of completely outside resources.
Yeah, thank you both. And so why does defunding the police matter? So you slightly touched on this, and kind of wanting to think about why it matters and how it relates to the Black Lives Matter movement. If you guys would like to touch a little bit on that. And Savion, I'll have you go first.
You'll have me go first?
Yeah.
Why is it important for the Black Lives Matter movement? I think that there's a clear history that the institution of policing has been used to reinforce this racial caste system in the United States. And so whether it is, outright violence or harassment of Black citizens on American streets, it is also an entryway into mass incarceration. And so not only when you call the police on a Black person, are you threatening lethal violence? You're threatening the full weight of the criminal justice system, which, if we think of a quick death and slow death, mass incarceration has certainly been the slow death of a lot of people.
Yeah. And yeah, Yomi, why does defund the police matter, and how does that link up with Black Lives Matter, and even within your work of the movement work you've been doing on the ground?
So one of the things I feel like a lot of people don't realize is it takes a hairdresser longer to become a police officer, or what? A hairdresser longer to, or yes. There is more time put in place for a hairdresser than a police officer in training. And so I feel like defunding would be able to put more emphasis on training programs, especially when someone's holding a weapon, because it's impossible for someone to protect and serve me if they fear me. And I think it's really important to have this education about biases, because right now with, let's not say like violence of the police, but harassment in general has led to this sort of taxation of people through traffic violations. So when someone gets stopped, for any, even if it doesn't mean anything, like even if it was like not really something that they should have been stopped for, because there's so many police already there following people, you can then be ticketed for, let's say your windows are too dark. And then as working class people, we don't always have the resources or the time to fight it. And so then we have to pay it, and it becomes this taxation. They then get more money, and it's not being allocated into education of that's wrong. Same crime happens all around. We just need to put police in everywhere instead of just in Black and brown neighborhoods. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's super important, because it's really calling the police on someone is a threat, like you mentioned. And so once we're aware of this and aware of how it affects these communities, I think it's solved.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. And I actually really like the statement that you just said of like, how are you supposed to protect me if you fear me? And I think that's very much at the roots of kind of what is going on in terms of how policing is carried out within Black and brown communities. This weird sense of people thinking that just because you're Black and brown that you are going to harm them, and then militarizing that force to interact with those communities is just, it's going to be a tinderbox of why we're here, basically. So I really like that statement. And then both of you sort of touched on this in your responses, but how would you like, funds from defunding the police to be reallocated? Are there any like particular like social programs that you'd like to see, or moving into policies, or do you think it should just be weaning more training for police officers? And Yomi, I'm actually going to have you go first this time to respond to that.
Okay. Yeah, I personally want to see more funds go into social work programs, into first responders for mental health crisis, and education, as well as training of police officers. I feel like the money would best serve the community if they were able to see it put in place, you know what I mean? So having beautification of the South and East Side, having a downtown community center for BIPOC, these are all amazing things that they could do with the funds if it were redirected in a way to help the community as a whole.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think that we can reform police as an institution. I think we've got to let it bottom out, because it has, its origins have been fundamentally to help this project of social control for Black people. And the research indicates that Windows policing doesn't work. More police on the ground do not prevent crime from happening. And so this idea that more cops on the beat prevent crime is just the research doesn't verify that. I think that we should build schools, not jails, to put it bluntly. The city of Madison wants to provide the school district with a reparation for paying the city to provide a perception of public safety in our schools, that's something worth considering.
Mm-hmm. And I think the idea of social control, like an agent of social control, is also very interesting. And unfortunately, social workers have also sort of been seen as agents of social control. And so in thinking about that, because a lot of the calls to defund the police has been sort of linked up with being like, oh, we should just throw more social workers out there, which is all well and good. However, with that social control piece that's linked to social workers, my question to both of you is, do you think we should put more social workers out in the field to deal with these issues? Or do you think we should be funding it just directly into the community? And Savion, I'm going to have you answer this one first, just because I've seen some things you've posted online around this, and I thought that it was very engaging and like the way you sort of framed everything.
Yeah, I'll start with a story. When I was growing up, and my mom was living with a disability, and I was missing some school. The solution people thought to that was to send, and we were going through evictions and stuff. Some people thought the solution was to send a social worker and a county sheriff person to execute an eviction and then threaten to take me away from my mother. That does not work. That does not help this Black woman pay rent. That does not help this Black woman get jobs training. That does not help this Black woman educate her son, raise her son. And, that history of tearing families apart, it's got to be acknowledged. I do believe in direct cash payments to historic disenfranchised, dispossessed communities. But I do think that the institution of social work, we can salvage it, if I guess for back of a letter phrase. But no, there are really good social workers on the ground, and I think the more we get folks like you Kadijha, in the field, and certainly with Laura, help educate folks, I think that the social workers can make a difference.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Savion. And yeah, Yomi, what is your sort of stance around this? Do you think, more social workers should be put into the field, or do you think we should just be reallocating these funds directly into the communities and allowing the communities sort of to make the decisions for themselves of how they would like to see that play out?
Yeah, I definitely believe both play an impact. What I would want to see more of is social workers speaking out about their experiences, because I honestly believe change starts in the heart, and because of most of them are having these interactions and seeing these problems firsthand, I think that those experiences are instrumental in making change and talking to others to put policies in place that they see need to be fixed. Um, know that there are mixed feelings with social workers in top communities. And I think one of the problems is that there's not enough community engagement when it comes to like government workers and just the community in general. For example, the police force here in Madison has to rotate like a year. And so they never get to know their communities under the statement that they are trying to get new experiences. But that means that they're never able to connect and they're never able to trust these people here because of that lack of I guess communication. So I think from social work point of view, I would want to see more of that, more of transparency and communication, and just outright acknowledgement of I'm a social worker, I see this needs to be changed, and have the community support you in that effort.
Awesome. Yeah. So basically, social workers can sort of support this work, particularly around like the defund the police movement, just by speaking up, and actually calling out when they see things happening, which I also agree is an important thing to do. And thinking about how all of this sort of relates to everything. All right, yeah. So thank you so much for your responses around that. So I'm going to jump into what's been going on with the Madison Metropolitan School District and their move to pull cops out of schools. So as I just said, the Metropolitan School District recently voted to remove cops from schools, which can be seen as an extension of defunding the police. Savion, you voted in favor of this. Can you explain your decision-making process and then what led you to vote in favor of the measure? Are there any like personal experiences that helped inform this? Stories from constituents, research?
Yeah. I mean, the research is especially clear is that when police are stationed in high schools, almost always there will be large disproportionalities of Black students with disabilities being arrested and funneled into the juvenile justice system at school. To be clear, also, our young people are also getting arrested in the community, and so that's why we really need to have this be a community-wide discussion. But having a police officer stationed in our high schools does not increase Black students' chances of graduation, does not increase their chances of matriculation into college or employment or success in the community. And my thought process was, we don't need somebody with a threat of a badge or a gun to resolve conflict between students. This is part of the broader issue of putting so many issues on the backs of police, or scapegoating the real hard answer, and instead just saying, oh, well, let the police handle it. No, we are professional educators, and we know how to resolve conflict between students. When I was a junior at La Follette High School, I was trained in restorative justice practices. Not only did we resolve like physical fights, but arguments and conflicts between students as well. And so I think that experience, that was the first YWCA restorative justice pilot in Madison, I think, and just seeing that the work is possible and real. For me personally, I think it always came down to there was obsession over, we don't have plans. We do have plans. The plans have been talked about for decades now, ever since police were stationed in schools. And so the work is possible. It's just an issue of actually committing the dollars, reallocating dollars from the police to these services that we know have better outcomes for our students.
How would you like to see those funds reallocated within schools? Hiring more school social workers, more teachers of color, more programming. How would you like those funds to be used?
Yeah, it's definitely the start of a new conversation in terms of how do schools have a culture of safety and belonging for all students. And so I'd like to see those funds reallocated to not only hiring more social workers and psychologists and improving our retention of Black teachers, Black and brown teachers. The research shows that Black and brown teachers get better behavioral results and academic results for students because they reflect the student diversity, or the diversity of the student demographic. But also hiring, people from the community who have relationships with students. We might call these our aunties and uncles. Here in Madison, we already have a number of assistants, school safety assistants, who are largely Black and brown and former students, recent graduates of MMSD, who we've hired to work in our high schools. That work, we've got to start valuing the work that they're doing. They work closely with our teachers, our principals. They did work closely with the SSRO. But that kind of like genuine, organic engagement with students is really necessary, because also, since they're recently graduated, they're not that far off in age from our current students, and so that commands a different kind of respect from students. But look, Black families have resolved disputes between each other with calling the police for a while, and we can mimic a lot of those strategies by hiring people from the community.
And then, so what are some action steps that social workers can take, whether they're school social work, whether they're school social workers or just, you know, social workers that are on the ground who do normal case management and things like that, or even at the, you know, macro policy level. What are some steps they can take to support no cops in school efforts within their school districts? Just because, you know, while we've accomplished this here in Madison and MMSD, there's other districts around the state that could probably also benefit from no cops in schools.
I mean, I should probably be embarrassed for not mentioning this, but Freedom Inc. has been at this on the ground for a while now. And so their methods of direct action, direct agitation, protests, and civil disobedience over the last 4 years, we have to give all the credit to them for this policy change. And so it takes a lot of grassroots organizing. It takes a lot of, you know, hard conversations with parents and students, because people have bought into the perception of safety that police provide. And what has also happened is that, you know, over the last decade, we've seen, you know, these really visceral images of school shootings. And so there is the idea that police prevent school shootings, and we really have to tackle that on. You know, I don't think any of us want police officers stationed in elementary or middle schools, yet Sandy Hook happened. What's also true is that Parkland had an officer, so did Columbine. Virginia Tech had an officer. And so we really have to have those difficult conversations in the, you know, amongst parents and students to build up support and to build momentum for this new vision of public safety.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, so primarily, you know, social workers should just be supporting and helping amplify the voices of people that are currently doing the work on the ground around this issue. And then, like, yeah, maybe highlighting some facts and statistics around like what policing in schools actually looks like, and is it truly beneficial to even have people there doing that work if they can't even stop the things that they're supposedly there to stop. So I do think that's an interesting, I think that's a good perspective to sort of have. And then Yomi, I would actually like to get your perspective on this as well. So from a youth perspective, how do you think not having cops in schools will impact the experience of Black and Brown students?
Yeah, so to listen to this, and I started my protest there in front of the school, and we were protesting the lack of teacher diversity. And I went to Edgewood and would meet with the Board of Education, and would go to Milwaukee with my principal and try to like create a scholarship to get community members, our aunties and uncles, back into school, because when I was trying to figure out like why do we have like lack of teachers here, and why do we have so many police officers, and the only people of color that I would see in school were cafeteria workers and janitors, I was like, there's something going wrong here, because as we're growing up, we're like seeing people who we value, who have power. This is what we see in schools, that people like us are only janitors and cafeteria workers. And then I realized the retention rate was so bad in our schools. Like even if they did bring people of color, they didn't want to stay, or they would be fired easily because the environment was just very, very toxic. Like the racism was not overt in our schools, and it was through teachers coming at teachers, and just little niches and like type of cliques. And I just had no like idea that even existed until I began to investigate and ask those questions. And then I realized that we have a lot of people here, like security guards, that actually want to be teachers, and that they should just go into teaching if they just had the education and scholarships available. And so I was trying to do that in high school. And I feel like for me personally as a student, seeing police officers in schools and not seeing those teachers there created this weird environment that was like traumatizing low-key every time I saw a police officer with a gun, because we would have conversations with them and they would explain like, oh, we're just here for safety, we're here to educate you guys. And I just thought that could be done in plain clothing. It didn't make sense to carry a weapon in a school, you know? It was just seeing that and hearing different things was not adding up, as well as when Trayvon Martin happened. And to have someone like that in our schools was disrespectful in many ways, because it was like, you guys can kill someone like me and get away with it, and now you're just here walking in the school with that power. It didn't seem right. And then, as well as the fact that during their educational talks, they would say, like, if there's a party, you know, you should let the police officers in, because if not, you could make it worse. We can call more, you would be arrested, stuff like that. And they were telling us these things, and we didn't really know our rights. We didn't know that we didn't have to let a police officer in. And it took me a while to realize, like, I don't have to open the door. What? Like, when I roll down the window, you guys can spot something, and then that can lead to other things. Like, I really didn't know my rights. And to have them do their police perspective on my rights was endangering to many, many, many students. And I'm very happy that polices are out of our schools, because I feel like, if anything, they harmed us more than they helped us. I think that it's not just BIPOC, it's everyone, because at the end of the day, the policies that affect me affect everyone too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much.
And then, what was I going to ask? So, how can people or social workers support youth who might be interested in advocating for no cops in schools, or around these issues of like equity that you highlighted while cops are currently in schools? Because obviously, like, since this impacts youth, like, we should be centering the voices of youth in that conversation. So Yummy, if you want to.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so how can people support youth who are interested in removing cops from schools? Just because it is happening to youth, like, it's important to uplift and you know, center the youth voices, because they're the ones experiencing, you know, that trauma that you had highlighted.
Right. I think one of the amazing things that I've noticed during this movement is, one, that people older than us have been doing this work for a long time. Freedom Inc. has been here for 20 years. So the work has been going on for a long time. And what they do is kind of create a template for us. So this movement inspires the young people to use their voice and create change here in Madison. But we're following a template that's been done before. I think that other people, like people that are older than us and stuff like that, should tell us their education, like experience and stuff like that, because we are youth and we are learning. So becoming mentors and giving advice is an amazing thing, as well as learning to step back and let us go with it. Because I think one of the amazing things about having a youth-led movement is that we have the passion, the motivation, the energy to continue their push, as well as connect to an audience that they might not be able to, because the future has many different faces and we sound very different. And so having that look and image will be able to connect us to so many different places. I've noticed that, like, for example, Tony Robinson's aunt is an amazing mentor of mine, and just gave advice during the protests, and other people would step up, like, oh, do a chant, you need to bring the motivation back up or the hype back up into the crowd, and they would step back and let us do it instead of like doing it for us. I think it is imperative that people ask questions and challenge representatives and challenge the way they see the community, because one of the most dangerous things that Madison has done has stated that it is so liberal and so progressive that it's hid all the oppression, because it doesn't fit the image of progression and the way they see Madison, then it doesn't exist. Once you stop seeing it as such a liberal and amazing place, then you're able to see all the problems and then confront it and move forward. So I think asking questions and moving in empathy instead of guilt. I've noticed a lot of people come to protests and different events because they have like this white guilt, and they're like, like my family's racist, like I should come. But then it's because you're moving, you're doing something that out of guilt, you don't really appreciate and understand why being there is important and why continuing to speak up is important. Because showing up is something, but it's not enough. Being part of an organization like Impact Demand, like Freedom Inc., like Urban Triage, making sure that policies get put in place, signing petitions. It's not just a moment, it's a movement. And so having those realizations that, okay, Madison isn't this end all be all amazing place, then we can begin to actually make systemic change.
Thank you so much, Yomi. Yeah, that was fabulous. And I actually kind of want to back up and touch on something that you had just said around, like white guilt and how that sort of plays out in movement spaces, just because that can cause harm in a lot of ways, just because the moment you get bored with it, the moment you're out, and then all of that momentum sort of falls. So, and you kind of already talked about this a little bit, but in your opinion, how do we move people to be anti-racist and understand that our liberation and freedom is all interconnected, and that defunding the police and Black Lives Matter is about all of us, because we're linked. Things things won't get better for you unless they get better for all of us. So just wanting to hear both of your thoughts around ensuring like anti-racism work is being done within movement spaces, and making sure that white people understand that you got to be in it for the long haul.
Ayomi said some brilliant things there, because it is a movement done in a moment, and it's an intergenerational movement that's continued across generations. I'm turning 26 next month, and I'm trying to hold on to every piece of youth as I can. But ultimately, we do stand on the shoulders of our ancestors, and we have to acknowledge and respect the work that they put in before us. And we should absolutely reach out to them for their counsel as we're trying to push this fight forward. That didn't answer your question, but.
Oh, Yomi, did you have anything else you wanted to add into that? No? Okay, all good. All right. So y'all kind of touched on this a little bit within your prior responses. But I think it's important to highlight that we are not in this moment by accident. So I just want to hear from both of you what you think led to this moment, either in a historical sense, a policy sense, in a social sense. Like, why are these things happening right now? Like, why, Yomi, did you have to take to the streets to demand action around these things? So yeah, and I know that's kind of like loosey-goosey, but how did we get here?
I think it's something that just happened. I think that it's here, and people are just so exhausted by not just George Floyd, but the fact that there were so many deaths in that time period that were so well known that it was like a tipping point almost. And I feel like we should, I guess, I don't want to say like history repeats itself, because new problems mean new solutions type of thing. But I feel like now the reason why at least I stepped forward is because this was my end point. This was a time when I refused to see another death, feared for the life of my brother, my mother, my father. And because of that fear, because of that anger, and because of that resolve to refuse to let something else happen like that, I had to be a part of it. And so I think it started through education at West, because I didn't know my history. And what happens is our history books are so whitewashed that you don't see, when you don't even see yourself in your book, in your history books, and you don't see that you have the power to create change, that someone like you, someone younger than you, was able to do something huge in their own community, what's stopping you? I think seeing that, as well as being able to notice racism and then not being able to stop seeing it in every microaggression, every little thing. This was my tipping point. And so that's what led me to stand up and do something about it here in Madison, see it through, hold people accountable. And I feel like, I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but yeah.
And Savion, yeah, in your opinion, like, what has led us here to this current moment in time? Like, historically, once again, you know, policy-wise, what do you think the roots of why we're here are?
Yeah, that's a really deep question. There's so much history, and you know, these very public executions of unarmed Black people aren't new. It's just that they're now being recorded. I think if we look at recent history, it's just amazing that 4 years ago, Colin Kaepernick was a pariah for taking a knee, and now we have white quarterbacks on Twitter saying Black Lives Matter. So just culturally, I am amazed at how we got here. I remember being involved in Ferguson, and you know, I didn't see this kind of change of hearts, minds, and attitudes like this is done. I think it's a credit to the ongoing organizing, to be honest with you. And, you know, there's always a debate about this on whether the culture is ahead of policy and politics, but I think people doing innovative things culturally and artistically have helped us get here as a society.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, there's definitely been a progression in terms of support around these, around like Defund the Police, Black Lives Matter, and, you know, equity overall. Yeah, so thank you so much for sharing your guys' perspective around that. And then Yomi, I want to bring this back to you a little bit. So across social media and things like that, you always keep repeating the term, "we keep us safe." How does that align with like Defund the Police, Black Lives Matter, and this current moment that we're having? Like, what does that mean to you?
We keep us safe entails so much. Usually the conversation that statement is brought up when it comes to police brutality, but the police aren't the ones that are just harming the Black community. It's everything. It's every department, everywhere you go. And so I think it's now not even just Black people keeping Black people safe, but us as a human race trying to keep each other safe from these biases and these policies that are systemically racist, and trying to acknowledge them and then say something about it. It's so crucial that you speak up. One of the things we also say is speak even if your voice shakes. And a protester said that, and that we always repeat it. We always let people know, because that ran true for me. That was something that, okay, yes, my voice is shaking all the time. Like, I'm always nervous and shy, but speaking up even when your voice shakes means that you're able to call people out and you're able to protect someone, because at the end of the day, George Floyd had his voice, was calling out for his mom, was saying, please get off my neck, you know, that his voice was all he had at the end of the day. And so if we don't use it, then what are we doing? Why are we here? What's the reason to keep fighting if we're not going to speak up? And so that's personally why I think that that statement is something that I hold very dearly, because Sandra Bland was an activist just like me, and her case is still unopened, you know? They were able to take her body, kill her, and what would happen to me if I'm speaking up and you see more of these attacks, even in Madison, with white people being violent, white terrorists being violent. So what would happen to me? Would people keep me safe? And it's honestly a cry for help, a plea. But it's also something like empowering, because it's so true. getting justice for people who have died has only happened because we kept each other safe. We held people accountable. And so, yeah.
Thank you. And then I have one more question that's going to be kind of out there a little bit. And once again, Yomi, this is towards you. So, in thinking about, once again, defund the police and the Black Lives Matter movement, the youth protests here in Madison, why do you think there's such a concerted effort by the police to target youth protesters? I know many of your leaders have actually been snatched up, and I know I would like to hear your opinions around that and how defunding the police would, and police, this whole movement could help around that, and how social workers can advocate for the release of youth leaders and just the non-arrest of youth leaders.
Right. I think so. During the time that we had formed Impact Demand and began the youth-led movement, there were other groups that had started, such as What's Next Forum. Most of the leaders in What's Next Forum, I think almost all of them have now been arrested or gone. And they weren't youth necessarily, but they were people that were like, Sire was one of them, and that was my brother in arms. That was my partner that would help lead protests when things went awry. We had each other's back. It was scary. It was very scary when that happened, because even I felt uncomfortable walking on State Street. I ended up walking back to my place with an ally, and I didn't realize that the ally was a white supremacist, like Bugaloo Boys or whatever, and they would dress up as medics. And so I assumed like this medic would help me walk me and my friend home back safely. Luckily, we had other people, and nothing happened. And then later, that like the next day or two, we found out that, oh, this person's a Bugaloo Boy, and I would have conversations with them, not even realizing like it was bad. But I think it was definitely scary. There were times when my brother and my mom did a painting, a mural on State Street, and I went to go see it, and I went to go see them, and then there were people, like, there's someone that always shows up at the protest, and I know his outfit, it's always the same, but he has like nice shoes, so I knew he wasn't homeless, and a nice backpack. So, and I used to work at the Capitol, so I knew something was off, and he was taking pictures of me and my brother and my mom, and we knew that that person was not for us and probably working with the police, and we just kind of went our separate ways and then met back up later, I think that it is scary. Even the other day, the march from Milwaukee to Madison, the youth that did that 50 miles more, I marched with them from the Capitol to the governor's mansion. During that march, one of the girls, her tires were slashed and the wheels were loosened, and somebody expected her to get in the car and crash. And luckily, she wasn't hurt, neither was her friend that was in the car. But this is very real. And I feel like people don't see that because they think Madison is not like that. Madison is so great. But this is very real. Our lives are on the line. And I think one of the things that is helping us is the community support and making sure that people come out and continue to free Joshua, free Sire. And what was scary was Joshua was talking with the police, hugging them. In so many pictures, you'll see Joshua hugging police officers, giving his card, recording. Then he was arrested, and now is federally being charged. There is no love. There is no trust between us and them at this point because their actions and their words do not match up at all.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of those experiences. And so, actually, gonna wrap up here pretty quickly because I just know Savion has someplace he has to be. So, are there any closing remarks either of you would like to make? And then, if not, we'll just jump right into the Q&A portion of the discussion. And I'll have Savion go first since you're the one that has to boogie out of here.
I have no closing remarks.
No closing remarks. Okay, yeah. All good. Yomi, you have anything else you would like to add? How can people find out more about Impact Demand? I think that's actually a good thing to shout out.
Yeah, we have Instagram, Impact Demand, Facebook page, as well as if you're part of the Madison for Black Lives, which is what I organized just to figure out what's happening, events happening in Madison. We are now shifting towards website. So go to events.impactdemand.org and you'll see all the events happening all throughout Wisconsin. And if you want to be involved, get in contact with me or fill out the volunteer sheet for Madison for Black Lives, as well as this on Impact's page too. And any skill that you have, any idea that you want to do or project in Madison, protest in Madison, you can go there and write it down and we can start working on it.
Awesome. Yep. Yeah. Thank you both for having this discussion with us here today. And yep, we'll open the floor up to questions from attendees, if there are any questions from attendees.
Kadijha, I just want to coordinate some things from the chat, just to get those voices in. Sorry, it sounds like I'm super echoey. Is it working? Rick noted about Indigenous communities and social work. That was very in line with your question about social work and trust, but thinking also about Native activists and their experience of CPS, I think was kind of came up at that point. Jeannie Ferguson also talking about CPS and thinking about how skills could be useful to citizens who need support. A point from Felicia about the way that police get held up as the sisters and brothers, big sisters and brothers of grandparents. So just an important point and echoing of, I think, some of what Yomi was saying there. Also, somewhat interest from Jill in race, class, gender issues and the thinking about the intersections of racism, classism, sexism, and ableism in this work and how that relates to policing. Bethany weighed in with thinking about how there was an article about how these were, the police officers were the positive Black role models, and what a issue and problem that is. I think I know that I might be misrepresenting people's thoughts, but I just wanted to echo those things coming up in the chat and see if there were any answers there. Also, encourage anybody to, raise a hand or put something in the chat, and I'll get quiet again now.
Is that on me? What? I can't hear you.
Oh, I think we're just waiting for questions right now, if there are any additional questions, because if not, I think we're good.
It's Friday afternoon officially.
Friday afternoon.
Going to get some sun in this July sun.
All right. All right, yeah, I don't think any new questions are coming in. So with that, I think we're gonna close it out. Yeah, thank you both once again, and thank you to the School of Social Work for hosting this, and thank you to all the participants that came in today. Yeah, really appreciate you all coming in and participating in this discussion and conversation, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Hi, thank you.